I hear stories, I hear excuses. She wasn't available, or they didn't do this, or we didn't have a sex life, or, we were just wash, rinse, repeat. We were roommates, stuff like that. And those are all, I guess you could say, reasons, but I really think those are excuses because there's nothing your partner can do that gives you permission to go outside of a committed relationship.
Mm.
If you're unhappy, if it isn't working, that's fine. And actually, relationships ebb and flow, right? It's not like you're going to be kumbaya all the time. But what you do have permission to do is to call your partner out. Hey, I'm not happy. Hey, this isn't working. Hey, there's no intimacy in our relationship anymore. Hey, we need help. Hey, I miss you. And then if your partner's non-responsive, doesn't want to do the work or something, then leave the relationship.
You are listening to The New Man, Beyond the Macho Jerk and the New Age Wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
If your partner cheats on you, can the relationship be repaired? Is it your fault if your partner cheats? And how do men respond differently to being cheated on? Adam Nisenson is the author of A Man's Guide to Partner Betrayal, a book specifically for men whose partners have cheated on them. We discuss why he calls infidelity a death experience, why it's such a blow to our self-esteem, and what not to do if you find out your partner has betrayed you. So you got this book, A Man's Guide to Partner Betrayal. I'm curious, okay, why? What motivated you to write this? Let's just go right into it.
The $1 million question, right? I mean, Tripp, it's a lot of things motivated me. The biggest one I would say was just my own personal journey and experience when, like, over 13 years ago, my now ex-wife, she had an affair, and I didn't have any resources. I was really, back then, even more so than now, there just wasn't much out there for men. The narrative, right, was always the man was the cheater, not the woman being the cheater. And also, we had a bad therapy experience. We did some couples therapy, and I didn't feel seen, heard, safe. I had a story. The other therapist was gaining up on me, and it was like my fault that my ex had this affair. And then I was studying to be a therapist, and then I became a therapist. And then I was so surprised I only work with men. And a lot of my clients would end up admitting to me, they didn't come to me for being betrayed by their partner, but they ended up admitting to me later this happened. And I just realized that I think a lot of men suffer in silence. Even the statistics show it's very underreported. I think they say 18% of married men experience infidelity from their partner. So
there's so much to unpack there. So let's talk about just this kind of myth. Like, there's this portrayal of men being the cheaters. Yeah. I mean, obviously that's not the case, but what is more the case? What is more of the norm, if there is such a thing, in terms of men being the ones that have been betrayed?
I mean, yeah, what is normal today? That's a whole nother podcast, right? But I think, what I'm discovering, like I said, they have approximately, they say 18% of men in a committed or marriage experience partner betrayal. I wonder if it's higher. They estimate like 30% of women experience it. And I have to say, in my therapy practice, I see about 30% of the men coming forward. Now, of course, on my betrayal shrink practice, that's all it is working with men through betrayal. But, I don't know what the social norms are or why, this science, why this happens. I think our society has gotten a lot less concerned about what other people think or holding, or just there's a lack of accountability in the world a lot more. I've noticed, I think that's happening.
And what does drive, is there a kind of a chain of events that leads to a partner choosing to step out against, from their partner?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, what's interesting in my world, I get to work on both sides of this fence, right? And I
Mm.
get to see
Like, what
a
do you
lot
work
of
with
it.
both people or?
Well, yeah, well, like in my therapy practice, I have guys that cheat on their wives,
Oh, right. Yeah.
right? And then my betrayal shink side, it's only men that have been cheated on. So I get to see both sides, right? And then I have the unique perspective of having myself experience being cheated on through, through my last marriage. So, I think a lot of times I hear stories, I hear excuses. The cheater uses, one of the things in therapy we call impaired thinking. And that's kind of like, right, where we have the capacity, like I can make up whatever story I want to make something right, or so I feel right, or so I can justify something. And and that's a lot of what I hear. I hear like she wasn't available, or they didn't do this, or we didn't have a sex life, or we were just wash, rinse, repeat. We were roommates, stuff like that. And those are all, I guess you could say, reasons, but I really think those are excuses because there's nothing your partner can do that gives you permission to go outside of a committed relationship.
Mm.
If you're unhappy, if it isn't working, that's fine. And actually, relationships ebb and flow, right? It's not like you're going to be kumbaya all the time. But what you do have permission to do is to call your partner out. Hey, I'm not happy. Hey, this isn't working. Hey, there's no intimacy in our relationship anymore. Hey, we need help. Hey, I miss you. Whatever it might be, you have permission to do that.
Hmm.
And then if your partner's non-responsive, doesn't want to do the work or something, then leave the relationship. But, I find infidelity on both sides, it's like a death. It's a death experience. And not only is it a death experience, it makes you question everything that you had and you did in that relationship. And it destroys us at a core to trust again, much less someone else, but ourselves.
This is a big deal. In what you're essentially pointing to is that as men, we respond to the infidelity differently than women do. Is that right? Or is it? I mean, it seems like we'd be like, well, yeah, it hits us both in the same way. We both feel lied to. We both feel hurt. But
Yeah.
there's something unique about how men tend to respond to an infidelity. How is it unique for
Yeah.
us?
Well, let me say this. I'm going to tell you what I think is unique, what I see is unique in my practice. That also doesn't mean for a woman, they might not experience some of those things too, right? The human experience, I think, the lines can be really blurred between the sexes. But one of the things I see with men is the immense shame. Men, most of the patterns I see, it feels like women go and they complain, they talk about it, they tell their friends, their girlfriends, they collaborate together. A man, I know I experienced the shame. I isolated. I had a story, and I get this a lot from my clients, that they're less of a man. Or there's also like, what's the saying? Men don't ask for directions. Well, we also don't ask for help,
Hmm.
right? It's that, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, it was always like, men don't cry, buck up, tough it out, push through it, And the other thing too is I think for a man, they lose their sense of worth. A lot of men, we identify by, I'm a husband or I'm a father or I have this job, right? Men often, I think, skew towards external validation or status. And so this really kind of knocks you off. It hits you at your knees. Um, yeah, and it makes it hard to prove your worth if you can't keep your partner happy.
Yeah, it's not just that my partner hurt me and this has damaged the relationship that I care about, but somehow this is a shot against me. This is about me,
Yeah.
and this is somehow a judgment against me and my own value. Those are two different things, but they're compounded together when this happens.
Yeah. Also, I'll tell you, I see a lot what guys do when they find out their partner had an affair, infidelity. There could be an emotion, right? There's all kinds of affairs, physical, emotional, stuff like that. A lot of the guys will tell me, I just want to forget it. I just want to move on. I actually just started with a new client like a week or so ago. And then one of the things he told me was, I feel like I just jump back in too fast. And men, we do that so we don't have to feel, right? Men also, like if I'm going to go stereotype, right? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, that whole thing. A lot of men struggle with vulnerability or understanding their emotions, or they're afraid of their emotions, which is like I get into my book in the different steps of this process of dealing with betrayal, and how men even navigate anger and things like that.
Let's talk about the different types, because I think that for a lot of us, it's we may not understand emotional betrayal or an emotional affair. Those are actually quite common, where people are pretty loose and sloppy with their energies. Tell me a little, or tell us a little bit about what constitutes an emotional affair.
The way I look at an emotional affair is, if first of all, if I'm sharing information that's personal, vulnerable, deep, that I should be sharing with my partner, right? And usually if you're doing it with someone else, you're not doing it with your partner. Or I'm looking for someone else that's giving me acceptance, that external validation. I always tell people, when you're doing it. We all know that feeling, right? We're like, oh, it feels good. And you get excited when you see someone, right? And that's a lack of your own personal boundaries, your own integrity, right? And I think I think people know when they're doing that. So that would be an emotional affair, is that deep emotional vulnerability and that connection, sharing inappropriate information too often.
And it's almost like, well, would you feel comfortable if your partner was in the room and they witnessed this interaction, or they witnessed these texts? Would you be like, oh yeah, here, look at this, and I'll be completely open about it? Or do you clam up and be like, nope, that's gonna not fly over too well?
Yeah, I'll tell my clients that are struggling with that, the ones that are doing the emotional affairs, I'll tell them, because they'll tell me like, well, I text her and stuff. I say, well, you should read those texts out loud. And they'll, no, I don't want to. They know, right? Yeah, this isn't, I'm going down the wrong rabbit hole for sure.
But I think in our culture, though, it's like, well, I haven't gotten physical with this person, so I'm not crossing a boundary.
100 impaired thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's this justification, even though I am getting something from it, and I'm leaking this energy outside of my relationship instead of maybe addressing something that's going on.
Yeah, I would say this: relationships take work, and nothing stays in our life linear, right? There's ups and downs, twists and turns. And if you're giving away maybe the little bit you have, life is hard and difficult, to someone else, then you don't have it for your relationship. It's going to be even harder. And like when I work with couples, I watch them grow. When you grow further and further apart, it gets to a point where you can't even see each other. You don't even remember why you got married. You don't even remember what it was you liked about each other. And that's because you've let that vulnerability go. You've just given up. So
does it happen where, as we're describing an emotional affair, and that the guy, because of his own shame, he just wants to look the other way and act like it's not happening? Or does he can justify like, well, it's not physical, so it's not really an affair? Is that a common thing?
I hear that theme from men and women, right? Because it's not physical, it doesn't count. Right. It's kind of like we get into the debate, which we won't today, I don't think, but like porn.
Like you're in a different zip code. It's not an affair.
People do that on porn.
Like
porn isn't cheating because there's nothing physical, right? But I think fantasy, putting your energy towards someone else, right, and your intentions towards someone else, I think you're cheating yourself and your partner. You're not being true to you. That's that impaired thinking for sure.
Okay. All right. One of the things that I've encountered with people that I've worked with that are dealing with this is rumination. Like they can't stop thinking about what happened. They can't move on. They're laying there at night wondering, did she do this? Did they do that? And it's a hell. And so I'm imagining that might be a place for someone to identify like, well, yeah, I'm doing that. I'm doing that thing where I just cannot stop thinking about this event or what's happening. How does somebody deal with the rumination?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's one of the toughest things when dealing with those kind of that what I find most people do is not only do they go into that rabbit hole and those intrusive thoughts, right, around what their partner did and imagining it and dreaming it and worst case scenario. I always tell my clients when they've discovered their partner's infidelity, the first thing I tell them is be careful what you think you want to know. You think you want to know everything, but the truth is that doesn't make it better. It actually creates a bigger gap. I always use the metaphor like, look, you need to learn some things like they ate a candy bar, but you don't need to know if there was peppermint in it or hazelnut, right? We just need the basics because when you find out all the details, it actually creates more of those intrusive thoughts and it makes it much more difficult to start to heal. Um, the other part is disclosure is another big part of this stuff. You know, sometimes what will happen, which creates more damage, is when we do what I kind of call it's a rolling disclosure. So your partner who cheated on you, they just, every day maybe they tell you something else. It's like death by a million cuts. And and often because as the betrayed, you're in so much shock, right? That initial shock and ego injury is my first stage in this work. There's something weird. It's like driving by a car accident. Like you don't want to see it, and yet we still look, we still slow down, and then after we see it, we always go, "Man, I wish I didn't look at that." And it's a lot of that. And so I always tell my guys, you need to have a strong boundary with your partner. You need to tell them that you don't want to know anything else because the truth is your partner is also after they've been discovered that they're spiraling themselves, right? They might be, if they want to stay with you, they might be in this maintenance stage and they'll do anything. And they also, for their own conscience, they want to dump it all, right?
Mm.
It's this really weird paradigm that happens. It's the other part is like the person that hurt me the most is also ends up being the person I want to help me feel better and hear my pain because they're familiar, they're comfortable. So it's an interesting dance that takes
Yeah.
I think you have to have help in the beginning to navigate this for sure.
What is the draw? Like, okay, I need to know all the details. What draws us to want to go into that place and experience? It's just almost it feels like it's a recipe for just great harm, self harm.
Yeah, I don't know what the mechanism is or why we do that, but I think it's because we want answers, we want clarity, right? I want to know that's maybe for a man too, right? Like that fix it mentality. If I know everything that happened and everything that's wrong, I can get through this.
Mm.
But that's actually not true when it comes to infidelity.
It's almost like if I can understand what was attractive or what drew you to this other guy, maybe I can what did he have that I didn't have? That kind of
Yeah, that's a big part in kind of that ego wound. Also, like the projections, a big part. Um, Looking like who is this other person? What do they have that I don't have? Like you were saying, how do I need to show up different? And then you end up getting lost. You're
Mhm.
focusing on the wrong. You're focusing on someone else and trying to be someone else first. Healing yourself, looking at yourself. One of the things I learned on my betrayal journey was I felt like I was ripped wide open. I felt like walking around, I felt like everyone can tell I was wounded. It's like in a movie, like every song was a love song. Every moment I woke up, I was thinking like, what's she doing now? What did she do before? It's so easy to get into that comparison, that competitiveness, let's call it, and jealousy, which is like my stage 4 in this work. You can get lost in that, and
Yeah.
it's misdirected healing energy, I think.
Did you see it coming? I mean, or were you able to put it in the rearview mirror? Like you saw that this was coming down the road, that she was going to step out?
It's a great question. Yes and no. So many of the guys I work with, like, we'll talk about that, and it's like so many of them will say, "Yeah, I had this gut feeling. I was getting suspicious," and I was doing the same. And as much as I was doing the same, I look, I had a part in the marriage not working, I didn't have a part in her going outside of the marriage. I want to make that really clear to all the men out there. If your partner cheats on you, it wasn't your fault. That was their choice. That was their doing. That's their deal to have to reconcile and to look themselves in the mirror. However, did I start checking out? I actually believe as I kind of knew something wasn't right, I started checking out more and more because I was afraid. I was afraid of what was happening. I was afraid to get vulnerable. I was afraid to step into this. I see that a lot happening.
Can it be repaired? So after this happens, can relationships be repaired, or is there always in the back of your head like, I don't know. How can I really know that she's just going to a work meeting in, Palm Beach?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is yes, it can be. However, the only way it can be repaired is if both partners are willing to do the work. And that's individually, right? Like your spouse needs to go figure out what it is about them, right? Often an individual that goes outside of their marriage is struggling, like they have some sort of intimacy block or love avoidance kind of thing. Also, a lot of times people that grew up like in unstable households, they have a mentality where they're always looking for a backup plan. Like, well, everyone else has left me, so you probably will too, even though you didn't show me you would, right? And so the cheater, the betrayer needs to go do their work. The betrayed needs to do their work, find out what it is about them. Like for me, I definitely know it made me a better man. And I was asked before, like, if you had to do it again, would you do it over again? And the crazy story is, yes, I would, because it's part of my story of stepping into manhood. I'll tell you this, I know how to love fiercely now, and I know how to hold boundaries. But what's even bigger than that is I know how to love myself. And I think a lot of the guys I work with, because they got so much into that um, that race of work and career and this and that, and just checking off. I was a big checking off box person. They didn't know how to live. They didn't know what was important. They didn't know how to love. A lot of us only have what we watched our parents model for us. So the answer is yes. If both are willing to do the work, I actually have some people I work with where their relationships, I think, are stronger than a couple that maybe had never gone through infidelity. Like they respect each other more, they trust each other more, their communication's better, their boundaries, there's no expectations. It's a much more pure, connective, raw kind of relationship.
Wow. So you talked about being gutted, when you found out, and I'm imagining somebody listening to this might be in that place. And then to hear that years down the road, this could become a moment that we're grateful for, even though right now it's just like just the most painful thing in the world. So I'm curious how can someone start to see that this could possibly become a great catalyst for their own transformation or their growth, or is it just not the time right now? Right now it's just get through this.
Yeah, I mean, look. The beginning of this is it's some of the most painful. Like I said, it's like experiencing a death, but you still get to see the person, but then you also have to look, part of you has to die too, metaphorically, right? For something new to appear. The beginning, you're not thinking about, well, I'm going to be amazing in a couple of years. I do tell my clients often at the very beginning, I said, one day you will look back at this experience and you will see that it made you a better person. And I'll have guys later saying, I see now. I see that better part of me. But you bring up another good point, Tripp, is that, you have to grieve. And again, men, we like to push down our feelings. We like to just move on. We want to fix it. If you don't grieve it, you don't get the capacity to heal it. And also the other big part is, how do you get to forgive yourself and your partner, which a lot of men struggle with that whole ideology too.
What's the cost of just trying to shove it down and, get back to checking boxes and, screw it, whatever. I'm moving on. That's in the
Well,
rearview mirror.
yeah, I mean, it's never in the rearview mirror. That's the cost. The cost is you're miserable. The cost is I see it happen. I have some clients in the past, they never did their work and they end up picking the same kind of partner because they're still the same kind of person. It has a huge cost, or it comes out sideways, or it comes out in depression, or it comes out never trusting, or it comes out never really experiencing what it feels like to be loved, to actually have another person hold your heart.
Mm.
And I think that's a beautiful experience as a human to actually do that and trust someone like that.
Yeah. I'm thinking about a client I had, and he was in a really messy situation, and essentially his partner had convinced him that he was completely responsible for her infidelity, multiple infidelities.
Mm.
And, he came to me thinking, I've got to really make improvements because otherwise she's going to keep being with these other men. It was a real cluster. And the growth for him was to be able to leave that relationship, period. It was such an unhealthy dynamic, and also just to find his own self-worth and stand up for himself. Really strong, capable guy. But when it came to relationships, he's a child, essentially. He was still very young in that regard. But that growth, had he not gone through that, he wouldn't have grown up essentially and learned how to be in really healthy relationships and really healthy dynamics where he mattered instead of, whatever she decided to do. It was his problem.
Yeah, you nailed it, man. And I was alluding to, it's all about finding your self-worth, your self-esteem, your self-love, right? It just changes the paradigm of how you see yourself in the world. And also, for me, it was like change what was important.
So if we're thinking that, all right, there's probably a good chance that 1 in 5 guys out there has dealt with this. So I can't be the only one that's dealing with this. Hopefully we've laid out a case for seeking support, not staying stuck here, not just trying to bury this under the rug. So what does seeking support look like? I mean, okay, great, I'm going to seek support, but what does that mean?
Yeah. So first, can I tell you what it doesn't mean?
Yeah,
I think
please.
that's, I'm flipping this on you. So men often will get toxic in this. And what they will do for recovery is they'll start looking online. They'll join like some of these Reddit groups and stuff. And let me tell you what, toxic masculinity, talking hate, finding people that will support that kind of ideology does not help you get better. It does not help you heal. It's not the help you need because it's just toxic. Right? So stay away from Reddit. There are plenty of amazing therapists and life coaches out there. You can find them that just work with men's issues. I'll plug myself, right? That's what I do. My book is the first of its kind, written by a man for men who are navigating being cheated on. Right? There's resources out there. You do that kind of work. So I would tell guys, find a thought leader that you identify with, or someone that the messages they speak sound like somewhere you want to go in your life. It's easy to slide into hate and anger and jealousy and find support around that. I also tell men, like, if you have a couple buddies that know about your situation, be sure to tell them, hold a boundary, tell them, hey, I don't want your advice. I don't want your judgments. I just want you to hear me. I just want you to validate me. I want to know that I'm loved and seen right now, because it's so easy to isolate. Men are great isolators. We'll put our heads down and just get back to work and grind it out. And that just doesn't help.
It's beautiful. I love that you made that distinction, because it's like, yeah, I'm not isolating. I'm on these forums and we're talking about how shitty women are. And we're talking about how terrible, we're demonizing, we're villainizing an entire.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
I'm aware, just like that can feel like progress. That can feel like I'm doing something. It's a false sense of empowerment. When in actuality, what empowerment looks like is I'm able to still be in relationships. I'm able to actually be in healthier relationships, and I'm able to forgive and not carry this just poison around with me.
Yeah, that's a burden. Also, I have some of my clients, they'll be like, my partner and I, we reconciled, but now it's awkward because one of my buddies talks so badly about my partner. And how do I now navigate that? Right.
Mm.
So that's why we say no advice from your buddies, just you want them to listen. I was lucky on my journey over 13 years ago. Like I said, there was no real resources, but I had a men's group. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Mankind Project.
Well, I've done the initiation. Yeah.
You did, right? Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I used to be a co-leader in it. I did like over 80 trainings and I was into that. And I will say a group like that organization is really beautiful because it's about men loving men, supporting men, holding men accountable. And I had my men's group from that. And those guys were my band of brothers. And they weren't trained to help me through the betrayal I was going through, but they definitely were there just to hold me, listen to me. I did anger work. I did grief work. And they just created a beautiful container for me. And what I know is there's just not much of that out in the world today. So if you can find that or look up the mkp.org, there's a lot of great stuff that they're doing, helping men, supporting men.
And there's just a ton of really way more positive resources these days for guys that are going through tough stuff, even if just beyond the betrayal thing. It's amazing how much the space has changed in the last 10 plus years. So, all right. A Man's Guide to Partner Betrayal, Adam Nisenson. Where do we learn more about you, man?
Yeah. So my website, betrayalshrink.com is probably the easiest way. I'm growing this site a lot. I'm a lot of blog articles in it. I'm actually in the next couple of weeks launching some online courses for men around betrayal and boundaries. That's another big thing I think we struggle with is setting boundaries with people. So yeah, betrayalshrink.com.
Great. And if someone is going through this today, what's just one thing that's going to help them out? What's one thing that we can leave them with?
Find help. I would say if there's no other resources that speak to you, if you could at least find a therapist, someone that can just listen to you, validate you, help you navigate the pain. Because it's that pain and sadness and the withdrawal I find that's probably the most dangerous thing for men in the beginning. And once you can navigate through that, you can start to find yourself, you could start to heal, and then you could start to ask for boundaries and things you want from your partner or discover what you want and need for yourself.
This has been great. I'm really grateful that you're doing this work. There's been a void for this. Nobody really talks about it, but it does happen. And so, yeah, thanks for doing this, man.
Hey, appreciate it. I appreciate your work too, your book, and everything you're doing on your podcast. It's good stuff.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, you got it.
If these interviews are helping you, please leave a positive review on whatever podcast app you use so that others can discover the show more easily.